So today we're going to talk about the Boston Tea Party. It happened on December 16th of 1773. There were a few different things leading up to it. That it was kind of a tipping point for the colonists. They were very fed up with a lot of the things that the British government was doing. So in 1765, Parliament passed the Stamp Act, which required a tax on every piece of paper used by the colonists. This meant every legal document that they had, even down to playing cards, wills, anything that they had to have a stamp on it that showed they had paid a tax for that piece of paper. So this didn't go over very well with the colonists. They didn't like being taxed for everything. And part of the reason they were being taxed was because the British government had spent so much money on the 7 Years' War with France. They were trying to recoup some of this money, and they were taxing the colonists. And the colonists basically felt like they didn't have part in the war. Why should they have to pay for it? In 1764, they were taxing sugar and molasses and a lot of other imports and exports. So this limited the ability of the colonists to make any money. It was also on sugar, which is a staple that was used very widely. So it was another thing that was generating a lot of tax. That one was repealed rather quickly, but the British government was still very adamant that they had the right to tax the colonies. The Tea Act of 1773 taxed tea that was imported from England. It also created a monopoly because they said that the only tea that they could buy was tea that was sold by the East India Trading Company, which was owned by England. There were a lot of smugglers who were bringing in tea from Holland into other ports to get around this tax. The British figured it out. They tried to stop it. It didn't go so well. One of the main things that the colonists would say was no taxation without representation. And so they felt that since they had no representative in Parliament to speak for them, they shouldn't have to pay the taxes that Parliament was instituting. And so this is a refrain that was heard around the colonies: no taxation without representation. So the Sons of Liberty was a secret organization that was founded by many of our founding fathers, including Samuel Adams, John Adams, Paul Revere, John Hancock. On December 16th of 1773, the Sons of Liberty gathered to discuss what was to be done about the tea. It was a very large gathering. They kept saying no taxation without representation. We shouldn't have to pay these taxes. What are we going to do about it? So they decided to party. So stirred by the rhetoric, over 100 men marched to the harbor and climbed aboard the 3 ships that were there. Some of them disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians so that they thought that would help protect them, because if they got caught, it was going to be really, really bad. They threw over 340 chests of tea into the harbor, which ruined it. In today's, that doesn't sound like very much, but in today's economy, that'd be about $1 million worth of tea. So the British, of course, retaliated with some more laws that were badly timed, and shortly thereafter, the American Revolution started. We're going to talk about those laws here in just a minute, but I'm going to show you a video. That goes a little bit more about the
You've
Tea
probably
Party.
heard of the Boston Tea Party. Something about a bunch of angry colonists dressed as Native Americans throwing chests of tea into the water. But the story is far more complicated, full of imperial intrigue, corporate crisis, smuggling, and the grassroots origins of the American Revolution. The first thing you need to know about tea in the 1700s is that it was really, really popular. In England, each man, woman, and child consumed almost 300 cups of the stuff every year. And since the English colonized America, Americans were crazy about tea too. By the 1760s, they were drinking over 1 million pounds of tea every year. So, when Britain wanted to increase taxes on tea in America, people were not happy, mostly because they had no say in tax decisions made in London. Remember that famous phrase, no taxation without representation? The American colonists had long believed that they were not subject to taxes imposed by legislature in which they lacked representation. In fact, rather than paying the taxes, they simply